The Great Milking Accident. Needing extra money after recently getting married, I picked up a second job as a farmhand during the day. I was also working the second shift at a local factory, so the hours worked out well. The people I worked for were elderly people. They needed a strong back to do the daily chores and other miscellaneous jobs on what would be called today a hobby farm. I just loved those people. They were funny and didn't take things seriously. Before stopping for the evening one day, we put 20 cows and calves into the barn so that they could be ready in the morning. Ralph, the husband, told me to arrive before sunrise the next day because he wanted to separate the calves from their mothers. He also asked if I could get my cousin Mike to help. I had helped my grandpa do this in the past, although we always did it with a series of gates out in the open. I never thought any more about it. The next morning, just as the sun was coming up, we were there on time. We met Ralph at the house and went to the barn. It was pitch dark in the barn at the time. He told us he was going to open the door so we could start separating. I thought to myself, wait, that door opens to the inside. How's he going to be in control? Just as he opened the door, the cows saw a little light, and all of them raced for the door at the same time. Mike and I looked at each other and said, this is going to be a train wreck. Ralph got caught between the door and the wall of the barn as the cows ran through the door. He was slammed up against the wall. It was easy to see he was getting hurt, but we couldn't get to him, and we couldn't stop the cows. Before it was over, all the cows had ran out. Sometime during the process, Ralph had fallen into their path, and they stampeded over him. We found him just outside the door, unconscious. I was a young 19, and my cousin was only 16. We'd never seen anything like this. I told Mike to stay and not permit Ralph to get up while I ran to the house to call the emergency number. Once I got back to the lot, Ralph had regained consciousness. He was mad because we had called the ambulance, and Mike didn't let him up. The ambulance arrived in just a few minutes, and they finally coaxed him to go to the hospital to get checked out. The doctor found there were 3 broken ribs and a broken arm. But unfortunately, due to further testing, they found he had cancer. He died a few years later. The accident left me, a 19-year-old kid with no real farming experience, in charge. With this being a busy day, Mike and I had to stay on the farm and finish the work. The veterinarian was to come and castrate the young bulls and vaccinate the milk cows. When the vet showed up, we told him we had no idea what to do. He was a good guy, and he took charge. He had us build a quick catch gate, and we went to work. We brought the young bulls in and told us to catch one and shove it into the chute. I chased one and got kicked about 150 times in 10 seconds. I ended up flat on my back in a mixture of manure, dirt, and straw. The vet was crying with laughter when I looked up. He then showed me how to catch one and bend his tail up so it pinched a nerve, and then the bull wouldn't kick. He called it putting it in first gear. After doing about 3 of them, I got the hang of it, I thought. Next one I caught, I bent his tail up, started pushing him into the chute. He was especially frisky, and my hands started slipping. Eventually, he kicked me right in the stomach. He kicked me hard enough that it brought me off my feet. Lying on the ground in manure again, I looked up at the vet. He looked down at me with a straight face and said, "Must have been in 3rd gear." We eventually got done and then helped him vaccinate the milk cows. After the vet left, we started getting ready as always to do the evening milking. We moved the cows in, fed them, and put them in their stalls. Suddenly, we were faced with the reality that neither of us knew how to milk. That's when the cows started to bawl and get restless. Mike and I both took turns trying, and all the milk would do is simply run down our arm. Luckily, my dad had just arrived home from work, and I called him. He had cows on the farm when he was a kid and had to milk every day. It'd been many years since he'd done it, but he came out and got the job done. I hauled the milk to the creamery, processed it, got it stored for the night. The missus got home from the hospital, and we went home for the night. The next morning, I was to show up to keep the farm functioning. But once again, milking got in the way. I didn't have the time to learn so that Mrs. had to milk the cows. Now imagine this. The missus was a 70-year-old woman. She was about 5 feet tall and weighed about 250 pounds. Not your usual milkmaid. She had the ability to milk the cows, so I had to go to the house, take her by the arms to help her into the barn. I positioned the milking stool in place, held on to her as she wouldn't fall, and seated her in the seat, and watched as she successfully milked until all were done. The missus would then clean herself up and drive to her full-time job as a dietitian at a local research hospital about 20 miles away. This scenario lasted for about a week. Then one morning I came to work to find we had no cows. I went to the house to tell her the cows had gotten out of the fence and I had to go look for them. She told me not to worry about it. She was tired of milking and sold them to a neighbor who had picked them up last evening. What a relief. I did learn another life lesson while working there. It was a hot day, and the missus needed help in one of her many gardens. I hated to work in the gardens, and she had a bunch of them. She directed me to pull weeds out of a specific row. In the meantime, she was doing the same in the row right beside me. This woman was very plump, and I was amazed she could stand flat-footed, bent over, and work for hours without standing up. I was still a teenager and had to do the same work walking on my knees. I'd been working a few hours and was getting hot, tired, and bored. We would stop occasionally for water, but she ran a tight ship and we returned to work quickly. Knowing she was afraid of snakes, I had another one of my epiphanies. I was pulling up foxtail, which is a weed that has a bushy top that looks like a foxtail. At that time, it was normal attire for a woman of her age to wear a house dress and hose rolled up just below her knees. I took one of those foxtails, ran it up her leg, and cried snake. She jumped and screamed. I was laughing and she was embarrassed. Eventually she smiled and told me not to do that again. We worked for another half an hour and I thought she needed another scare. Keeping this in context, women of that age were accustomed to telling young people once not to do something, and they fully expected that the request would be followed. If you didn't follow that request, it was well within the rules that retribution would be dealt. Bored, hating every second of pulling weeds, yet nearing the end of the row, I thought it'd be funny if I tried the snake up her leg one more time. Bad mistake. I pulled the foxtail, ran it up her leg, and hollered snake. This time, she had a hoe in her hand. She must have expected that I was going to try it again. She never even flinched. What she did do was quickly turn and hit me directly in the ear with a hoe handle. All she had to do was say, "I told you." Then she went right back to work. I finished the day with a fat air and no more foxtail snakes. One last learning event happened while farming was still my great calf roping experience. The hobby farm was only about 80 acres, but to me I was the overseer of a fully functioning ranch. The farm was just a miniature of a large operation. He had chickens, cows, pigs, ducks, geese, guinea, several other large gardens, a few small crop fields, and all the work that goes along with its care. I had enough chores to fill about 6 hours a day. Nothing hard, just time-consuming. That will get you into trouble when you have 8 hours to do work with 2 hours to spare. It was a real sight to behold when I was working alone with the animals. Not an animal lover in the first place, I was also somewhat afraid of them. I just didn't know what to expect or how to deal with their emotions. Yes, farm animals have emotions, and they get in a bad mood, like the time when the geese were sitting on their eggs, waiting for them to hatch. I was doing my work and for the most part just ignored them. They normally got out of the way as I passed. This day, I needed to get something behind their nests. I walked over, and a couple of them came out of their house hissing and running right up to me. Like the macho man I was always trying to be, I was alone, so I screamed like a girl and ran. It took about an hour to devise a plan to get past those killer birds. Another day, my wife and my cousin, Mike, were out to visit. I was done for the day, so we were just sitting and talking. We had some young calves out in a small lot next to the house, and were talking about them and laughing. My cousin Mike and I asked if I'd ever roped one of them. I said no, but it didn't look that hard to me. He implied, "I bet you can't," and that's when I went to the barn for the lasso, which made me think about the famous redneck last words, "Hold my beer and watch this." Getting back to where we were standing, I put a loop in the rope just like you see in the movies. As a kid, I'd done this many times on stationary animals. Between the calf and us was an old section of small fence, about 3 feet or so high, not enough to keep him in, and something that needed to be removed later. These calves were about 300 pounds and full of energy. I swung the loop over my head and threw it out at one of the calves. Just my luck, it fell perfectly over its head. The calf noticed and started to run. The loop tightened, and I held onto the rope for dear life. When the loop tightened, the physics took over. When a 300-pound object runs in the opposite direction of a 175-pound object, the lesser of the objects doesn't have a chance. That's when the calf dragged me over the broken-down fence in about 4 seconds flat. My jeans were torn into ribbons, my legs were bleeding, I was in cow dung from head to toe, and my nose, ears, and eyes were filled with dirt. Filthy and wounded, it was only then my good sense told me to let go of the rope. Looking up for some sign of caring from my wife and cousin, all I could see was them laughing so hard they had tears streaming from their eyes. Needless to say, my calf roping days were over. Eventually, my second shift job changed to a daytime job, so my farmhand career was over. I had the best time of my working life with the hobby farmers. They taught me so much about hard work and life in general. They were very good people.